I thought the worst part would be going through his stuff, maybe finding some embarrassing photos or old magazines. I had no idea I was about to uncover something that would make me question everything I thought I knew about my family. My name's David. I'm 28, work in IT in Portland, Oregon. Normal guy, normal life. Or at least it was, until I found what was locked away in Gerald's basement. What I'm about to tell you, it's going to sound crazy, but I swear on my mother's grave, every word of this is true. Gerald lived alone in this old craftsman house in North Portland, the kind of place that looked charming from the outside, but felt heavy and oppressive once you stepped inside. He'd been a bachelor his whole life, worked as a mechanic until he retired. Quiet guy, kept to himself mostly. Family gatherings were awkward with him there. He'd just sit in the corner, nursing a beer, watching everyone with these pale gray eyes that seemed to see too much. When he died of a heart attack, I was the only family member willing to deal with his estate. My mom, his sister, couldn't bring herself to go through his things. Too many memories, she said. But honestly, I think she was just creeped out by him. We all were, if I'm being honest. The house was exactly what you'd expect from a 67-year-old bachelor. Sparse furniture, everything functional but worn, stacks of automotive magazines, a few old tools, not much else. It should have taken me a weekend to clean out, maybe less. But then I went down to the basement. The basement was unfinished, just concrete walls and exposed joists. A workbench sat against one wall, covered in rusty tools and oil stains. But what immediately caught my attention was this massive industrial freezer in the far corner. And I mean massive. The thing was easily 8 feet long and 4 feet deep. Big enough to hold a whole deer, maybe two. That wasn't the weird part, though. The weird part was a heavy chain wrapped around it, secure with a thick padlock. Who chains up a freezer? I mean, what could be in there that needed to be locked away? I looked everywhere for the key, went through every drawer, every toolbox, even checked Gerald's key ring. Nothing. The freezer was humming quietly, still plugged in and running. I could feel the vibration through the concrete floor when I got close to it. My first thought was maybe he kept expensive meat in there, like premium steaks or something. Gerald had always been paranoid about people stealing from him. But chains? That seemed extreme, even for him. I decided to leave it for later and focus on the rest of the house. But every time I went down to the basement to grab tools or check the water heater, I found myself staring at that freezer. There was something about it that drew my attention, like a scab you can't stop picking at. On the third day, something changed. I was down there sorting through a box of old receipts when I heard it. A soft sound, barely audible over the freezer's hum. At first, I thought it was just a compressor kicking in, but then I heard it again. The 3 taps, 3 distinct knocks, coming from inside the freezer. I froze listening. The basement was dead silent, except for that constant electrical hum. Then, after maybe 30 seconds, 3 taps. My rational mind immediately kicked in. Old freezers make noises, right? Ice shifting, metal expanding, and contracting with temperature changes. That had to be it. But my gut was telling me something else entirely. I walked over to the freezer and pressed my ear against the cold metal lid. The humming was louder now, vibrating through my skull. I waited there for maybe 5 minutes, feeling ridiculous, but I didn't hear the knocking again. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about that sound, trying to rationalize it. By morning, I convinced myself it was nothing, just an old appliance making old appliance noises. But when I went back down the next day, I heard it again. And this time it wasn't just knocking, like fingernails dragging across metal. Slow, deliberate scratches that made my teeth ache just listening to them. They come in clusters. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Then silence. Then scratch, scratch, scratch again. I tried to tell myself it was mice. Maybe a family of mice had gotten trapped in the freezer's mechanisms somehow. But mice don't knock in patterns of 3. I called my mom that evening, asked her about Gerald's freezer. She got quiet for a long moment. David, honey, why are you asking about that? It's locked up with chains, Mom. What did he keep in there? Another pause. I don't know. Your uncle was always secretive about things. Just get rid of it, okay? Have someone come haul it away. But I couldn't just have it hauled away. Not without knowing what was inside. The sound were getting worse. By the end of the week, I was hearing them every time I went down there. Knocking, scratching, and sometimes it sounded like movement, like something shifting around inside. I started having dreams about that freezer. Dreams where I could hear a voice calling from inside, muffled and desperate. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, and for a split second, I'd swear I could still hear that voice echoing in my ears. The dreams were getting to me. I was losing sleep, losing focus at work. My girlfriend Emma kept asking what was wrong. But how do you explain that you think your dead uncle's freezer is haunted? Finally, I decided enough was enough. I bought a pair of bolt cutters from Home Depot. Heavy-duty ones that could cut through just about anything. If Gerald wanted to keep whatever was in there locked up, fine. But he was dead now, and I needed to know what I was dealing with. I went to the house on a Saturday morning, bolt cutters in hand. The basement seemed darker than usual, even with all the lights on. The freezer sat in its corner like some kind of metal coffin, humming its constant tune. As I approached it, I heard the scratching again. Longer this time, more frantic. I gripped the bolt cutters tighter. Just mice, I muttered to myself. Just fucking mice. But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. The chain was thicker than I'd expected. It took me nearly 10 minutes to cut through all the links, and by the time I was done, I was sweating despite the basement's chill. The severed chain fell to the concrete floor with a metallic crash that seemed to echo forever. I stood there for a moment, staring at the freezer's lid. My hands were shaking. Part of me wanted to just walk away, pretend I'd never heard those sounds. But I'd come too far to back down now. I lifted the lid. The smell hit me first. Not the sharp scent of frozen air you'd expect, but something else. Something organic and wrong. Sweet and sour at the same time, like fruit that had gone bad and then been frozen. Inside the freezer, wrapped in clear plastic sheeting, was a woman. I stumbled backward, my stomach lurching. She was young, maybe early 20s, with dark hair and pale skin. Her eyes were closed, and for one horrible moment, I thought she might just be sleeping. But no one sleeps wrapped in plastic, in a locked freezer. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone to call 911. But before I could dial, I noticed something that made my blood turn to ice. She was wearing a necklace, a small gold cross on a delicate chain. I recognized it because my mom had one exactly like it. All the women in our family did. It was a tradition passed down from my great-grandmother. With numb fingers, I lifted the plastic sheet slightly and looked at the woman's face more closely. Really looked at her. The bone structure, the shape of her nose, the way her eyebrows arched. She looked like family. I found the photo albums in Gerald's bedroom an hour later, after the police had taken the body away. Hidden in the back of his closet, behind old winter coats that smelled of mothballs and secrets. The albums were full of pictures I'd never seen before. Family gatherings from decades past, back when Gerald was young and actually smiled sometimes. And in many of those photos was the woman from the freezer. Her name was Sarah, according to the writing on the back of one photo. Sarah and Gerald, 1987. She was standing next to him at what looked like a family barbecue, both of them laughing at something outside the frame. She was wearing that same gold cross necklace. I kept flipping through the albums, finding more pictures of Sarah. Sarah at Christmas dinner, Sarah helping in the kitchen, Sarah sitting on Gerald's couch, reading a book, and then, abruptly, the photo stopped. The last picture of Sarah was dated August 1988. After that, it was just Gerald alone, his smiles growing rarer and more forced with each passing year. The police investigation revealed the truth over the following weeks. Sarah Mitchell, 23 years old, had been reported missing in September 1988. She'd been Gerald's girlfriend, but more than that, she'd been pregnant. The autopsy confirmed it. 3 months pregnant when she died. The detective assigned to the case, Detective Morrison, was a gruff man in his 50s who'd seen enough evil to know it when he smelled it. He sat across from me in the police station. Files spread between us like evidence of our family's shame. "Your uncle never married," Morrison said, lighting a cigarette despite the no-smoking signs. "But he came close once. Sarah Mitchell. They were planning a wedding for the spring of '89. "What happened?" Morrison leaned back in his chair. "Near as we can tell, Sarah found out something about your uncle, something that made her want to leave. We found her diary in his house, hidden behind some loose boards in the basement wall." He slid a photocopy across the table. Sarah's handwriting was neat, feminine. The entry was dated August 15, 1988. "Gerald's been acting strange lately. Distant. I found some things in his room that scared me. Photos of other women. Women I don't recognize, but they all look like me. Dark hair, same build, and they're all wearing crosses like mine. When I asked him about them, he got angry. Really angry. I'm starting to think I don't know him at all. I think I need to leave." "There were more entries," Morrison continued. She was planning to break up with him, move back to her parents' place in Seattle. The last entry is from August 28th. She was going to tell him that night. He stubbed out his cigarette. She never made it home. The worst part wasn't just that Gerald had killed her. The worst part was what we found when we started digging deeper into those other photos Sarah had mentioned. 3 more freezers were found buried in Gerald's backyard, their electrical cords long since severed. 3 more women, all brunettes, all wearing gold cross necklaces, all pregnant. The oldest remains dated back to 1975, when Gerald was just 30 years old. It turned out that Gerald had a type, and when the women in his life tried to leave him, especially when they were carrying his children, he made sure they stayed forever. The knocking I'd heard, the scratching, the police said it was probably just the freezer's mechanisms, maybe mice that had gotten into the electrical components. But I know better. I know what I heard down there in that basement. Sarah was trying to tell me her story. They all were. Gerald's house was demolished 6 months later. The city said it was for structural concerns, but I think they just wanted to erase the horror that had happened there. Fair enough. Some places are too tainted to ever be clean again. I still have nightmares sometimes. Dreams where I'm back in that basement, hearing those sounds coming from the freezer. But now, instead of fear, I feel something else. Gratitude. Gratitude that Sarah finally got to tell her story. That she and the others finally got to come home. My mom doesn't talk about Gerald anymore. None of the family does. We've deleted him from our conversations, our memories, our Christmas card lists. As if pretending he never existed will somehow undo what he did. But I remember the sound of fingernails scratching against metal, desperate to be heard. And I'll never forget that sometimes the monsters in our family are the ones sitting right next to us at dinner, smiling and asking for the salt. I'm still trying to process what happened to us in that house in Portland. Part of me wishes I'd never found that room. But the other part knows that someone else might have ended up like us if we hadn't. My name is Jake, and 3 months ago, my girlfriend Emma and I thought we'd hit the jackpot with our new place. Now I can't sleep without checking every door in my apartment twice. Let me start from the beginning. Emma and I had been together for about 2 years, both working remote tech jobs from our cramped studio apartment in Seattle. You know how it is, decent salaries, but the cost of living was crushing us when my company went fully remote post-pandemic. We decided to move somewhere more affordable. Portland seemed perfect, still cool and artsy, but way cheaper than Seattle. House hunting in Portland was actually pretty fun at first. We wanted something with character, maybe a craftsman bungalow or one of those cool converted warehouses. That's when our realtor, this energetic woman named Carol, showed us this amazing house in the Alberta district. It was a beautiful 1920s craftsman that had been completely renovated. Hardwood floors, original built-ins, this gorgeous kitchen with subway tiles. The best part was a finished basement, fully converted with proper drywall, carpet, even a half bath down there. Perfect for our home offices. We thought the price was incredible, like suspiciously incredible. But Carol explained that the previous owner had to relocate quickly for work and was motivated to move it fast. The house had been on the market for less than a week. The last tenant was some kind of YouTuber, Carol mentioned while we were checking out the basement. Real quiet guy, kept weird hours, but never caused any problems with the neighbors. We put in an offer that same day. Moving to Portland felt like this huge adventure. For the first time since college, we had real space. Emma set up her graphic design studio in the smaller bedroom upstairs, and I claimed the master bedroom for my software development setup. The basement became our shared chill space. We got a sectional couch, set up our PlayStation, the works. Our neighborhood was perfect. Food trucks on every corner, craft breweries within walking distance, neighbors who were friendly without being intrusive. The couple next door, Dave and Sarah, brought us a bottle of local wine as a housewarming gift. It felt like we'd found our people. The house did have some quirks, though. The basement door had this habit of swinging open by itself. Probably the old foundation settling, we figured. There was this weird acoustic thing where sounds from upstairs would echo strangely in the basement stairwell. And no matter what we did with the thermostat, the basement always felt about 10 degrees colder than the rest of the house. But hey, character, right? That's what you get with an old house. It was a rainy Saturday in early March, which, let's be honest, describes most days in Portland, when we decided to really organize the basement. We'd been using it as a dumping ground for moving boxes, and it was getting cluttered. Emma was going through our old photo albums while I tried to figure out the best way to arrange our furniture. That's when I noticed something weird about the wall behind our couch. You know how sometimes your brain registers something, but doesn't immediately process it? There was this slight difference in the paint color, almost like a faint outline. When I moved the couch and ran my hand along the wall, I could feel it, a tiny gap, barely perceptible, running in a perfect rectangle. Come check this out. She walked over, brushing dust off her jeans. What's up? I think there might be a door here. We spent the next hour carefully examining that wall. The gap was definitely real, running about 6 feet high and 3 feet wide. No handle, no obvious mechanism, but it was absolutely a door. After some Googling and a lot of trial and error, we figured out it was a push latch system. The door swung inward with this soft whoosh of stale air. The smell hit us immediately. Not exactly bad, but heavy, like old carpet mixed with something else I couldn't quite identify. Something slightly sweet and organic. I used my phone's flashlight to peer into the darkness beyond. Holy shit, Emma whispered. The room was small, maybe 8 by 10 feet, and every wall was covered in professional acoustic foam. The kind you see in high-end recording studios, except this stuff looked weathered, more yellow than the vibrant colors you usually see online. The floor was concrete, painted black, with these dark stains that had soaked deep into the paint. Some looked old, but others seemed fresher. But what really caught our attention were the mounting brackets. Professional camera mounts bolted into the walls at different heights and angles. Some still had equipment attached. Old camcorders that looked like they were from the early 2000s. Others had been removed, leaving just holes in the acoustic foam. And then there were the rope marks. Deep impressions in the foam where a rope had been tied. Grooves that spoke of serious weight and tension. On the back wall, there were 4 distinct marks, evenly spaced, at about shoulder height for an average person. What the hell was this guy filming? Emma said, her voice barely audible. I swept my phone light across the ceiling and found more mounting points. heavy-duty ones that could have supported serious equipment. In the corner was a small floor drain, like you'd find in a basement bathroom, except this room had clearly never been plumbed for water. The acoustics in there were eerie. When I clapped my hands, the sound was completely absorbed. No echo at all. It was like being inside a sensory deprivation chamber. We backed out pretty quickly after that. Over dinner that night, we tried to make sense of what we discovered. Maybe the previous tenant really was a serious content creator. The camera setup could have been for a multi-angle YouTube channel or podcast. The rope marks might have been for hanging backdrops or equipment. Maybe he was doing ASMR videos or something. Emma suggested, twirling pasta around her fork. That would explain all the soundproofing. It made sense. We're both rational people. There had to be a logical explanation. But when I called Carol the next day to ask about it, she got weird. Jake, honey, why are you asking about the previous owner? Is everything okay with the house? Everything's fine. We just found this hidden room in the basement, and we're curious about what it was used for. Long pause. Hidden room? I don't remember anything about a hidden room in the listing. The seller never mentioned anything like that. Maybe it's just extra storage space. When I asked the previous owner's contact info, just to ask about the setup, I explained she claimed she didn't have it. These creative types, they can be pretty private. Plus, he's probably already settled wherever he moved to. That should have been our first real warning sign. We sealed the room back up and tried to forget about it. Out of sight, out of mind, right? Then Emma started having trouble sleeping. I keep hearing things at night, she told me over coffee one morning. She looked exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't hide. It sounded like crying, really faint, but definitely someone crying. I hadn't heard anything, but our bedroom was on the second floor, pretty far from the basement. Maybe it's someone next door? I suggested. Dave and Sarah have been having some relationship issues lately. No, it's not coming from outside. It's coming from below us, from the basement. That night, I made an effort to listen. Around 2 a.m., I heard it too, this soft, muffled sobbing that seemed to drift up to the floorboards. It was so quiet I had to hold my breath to make it out. We crept downstairs together, phones ready for flashlights. The basement was completely empty and silent, dead silent. But the moment we went back upstairs to bed, the crying would start again. This became our nightly routine from hell. The sounds would start around 2 a.m. and continue until sunrise, always when we were both upstairs. Always muffled and distant, like it was coming from somewhere very far away. We checked everything we could think of. The plumbing, wondering if it was some weird water hammer effect. The heating system, thinking maybe it was a ductwork. We even called our landlord, we were renting to own, who insisted there was no history of any problems with the house. Old houses make noise, he said over the phone. It's totally normal. You'll get used to it. But this wasn't random house settling. This was consistent. This was human. After 2 weeks of barely sleeping, we set up a camera in the basement. If something was down there, we'd catch it. The footage showed nothing. Night after night, a completely empty basement. Just shadows shifting slightly as the house moved. But on the audio track, clear as day, you could hear the crying. It was definitely a woman's voice. Young, desperate, utterly exhausted. The kind of crying that comes from complete despair, not just sadness. By late March, the sounds were getting more intense. Along with the crying, we started hearing other things. Shuffling footsteps, the creak of rope under tension. And sometimes, this was the worst part, what sounded like muffled screaming that would cut off abruptly, like someone had clamped a hand over her mouth. Emma was barely functioning. She lost 10 pounds and was constantly jumpy. I wasn't much better, but one of us had to keep it together. We need to move, she said one evening, staring at her untouched dinner. This is destroying us. I agreed, but we put down first and last month's rent plus security deposit. Finding a new place would take time and money we didn't have. Just give me a couple more weeks. I promise. I'll start looking for something else tomorrow. That night, the sounds changed completely. Instead of crying, we heard what sounded like a conversation. Two voices, the woman we'd been hearing and a man. We couldn't make out words, but the tone was unmistakable. He was calm, almost gentle. She was pleading, begging, then sudden, complete silence. The silence was somehow 1,000 times worse than the crying. The next evening, I had to work late. A client in New York needed a bug fix deployed before their morning launch. Emma texted me around 10 p.m. saying she was going to bed early, completely wiped out from another sleepless night. I got home around midnight, planning to grab some leftover pizza from the fridge before heading upstairs. That's when I heard it, the crying, clear and unmistakable, coming from the basement. But Emma was upstairs asleep. I could see the soft glow of her phone charger under our bedroom door. My blood turned to ice. For weeks, the sounds had only happened when we were both upstairs together. This was the first time I'd ever heard them when I was alone downstairs, which meant either our theory about the pattern was completely wrong, or someone else was upstairs with Emma. I stood frozen in our kitchen, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might wake the neighbors. The crying continued from below, that same desperate, muffled sobbing we'd been hearing for weeks. Very quietly, I crept to the bottom of the stairs. The bedroom light was off now, but I couldn't hear any movement up there. No talking, no sounds of Emma getting ready for bed. Just that horrible, muffled crying from the basement. I pulled out my phone and called Emma. It rang once, twice, then I heard it. Her ringtone playing from somewhere below me, not from upstairs, from the basement. The crying stopped immediately. I took the stairs 3 at a time. Our bedroom was empty. The bed was still made from that morning, untouched. Emma's laptop was closed on her desk, her coffee mug from breakfast still sitting there, with a ring of dried coffee in the bottom. She'd never come home from her evening walk. With hands shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone, I called her number again. This time I could hear it clearly, her phone ringing from somewhere in the basement, the same basement we'd been hearing crying from for weeks. I grabbed a kitchen knife and the biggest flashlight we had, then forced myself to go back downstairs. The basement looked exactly normal, just like always, but her phone was definitely down here somewhere. I followed the sound to that hidden room. The door was slightly open. Inside, the room looked different. Some of the acoustic foam on the back wall had been pulled away, revealing a space behind it. Not just a hollow wall, an actual crawl space, big enough for a person. Emma's phone was on the concrete floor. The screen cracked like it had been dropped. Next to it was her purse and one of her running shoes. But no Emma. In the acoustic foam, I could see fresh rope marks. New impressions that definitely hadn't been there when we first discovered the room. And those stains on the concrete floor that we'd noticed before, some of them looked wet, recent. That's when I heard the voice behind me. She figured it out, about the sounds. I spun around. A man was standing in the doorway, maybe 40, completely average looking except for his eyes. His eyes were too calm, too focused, like he was looking at an interesting specimen instead of another human being. The previous tenant, he continued in this conversational tone, was very talented, very thorough in his work, but he had to relocate suddenly, and he left all his equipment behind. Seemed like a waste to let it all go unused. I raised a knife, but my hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip it. "Where is she?" He smiled, and it was the most chilling thing I'd ever seen. No warmth, no humanity, just cold calculation. "She's nearby. She's been very helpful, actually, teaching me about the acoustic properties of this room. Did you know that even perfect soundproofing isn't really perfect? There are always tiny ways for sound to travel, if you understand the physics." What happened next is still mostly a blur. He moved toward me and somehow, pure adrenaline I guess, I managed to catch him across the arm with the knife. He screamed, more in rage than pain, and stumbled backward into the wall. I ran, up the stairs, through the kitchen, out the front door, screaming for help at the top of my lungs. Dave and Sarah's lights came on immediately. Someone called 911. When the police searched the house, they found a room in the space behind the acoustic foam. It was bigger than I'd realized. A whole network of hidden passages and crawl spaces that connected to the storm drain system. The previous YouTuber had been very busy. They found camera equipment, recording devices, hard drives full of things I never want to think about, evidence that linked to at least 4 missing persons cases in the Portland area over the past 3 years. But they didn't find Emma, and they didn't find him. The police told me that the man I described didn't match any residents in the neighborhood. The previous owner had apparently never existed. The paperwork trail led to a series of shell companies and fake identities. Carol, our realtor, had vanished completely. Her office was cleaned out, her phone disconnected. It's been 3 months now. I live in San Francisco now, in a high-rise apartment with 24-hour security and locks on every door. I've changed my phone number 3 times, and I'm seriously considering changing my name. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear it. That muffled crying, seeming to come from somewhere below. And I know that somewhere out there, in another house with another hidden room, someone else is hearing sounds they can't explain. Someone else is wondering why the sounds only happen when both people are upstairs. Someone else is about to discover that those sounds are completely real. If you're house hunting and the price seems too good to be true, if the realtor is vague about the previous owners, please, just walk away. Some deals cost more than money. And if you ever find a perfectly soundproof room in your basement, don't try to rationalize it away. Just run. I never told the police everything about what I heard in those last few seconds before I ran from that room. From somewhere in those hidden passages, faint but unmistakable, I heard Emma's voice. She was talking to someone, teaching them about the acoustics, teaching them how the sounds travel through old houses, teaching them exactly how to make people upstairs hear whatever they wanted them to hear. The worst part? She sounded calm, professional, like she was genuinely interested in the technical aspects, like she was enjoying it. I think about that sometimes when I can't sleep. Was the man I encountered that night the original predator, or just another victim who'd been taught well enough to take over the operation? And somewhere out there, is Emma teaching the next person in line? I don't want to know the answer, but I have this terrible feeling that someday I'm going to find out. Because 3 weeks ago, I got a friend request on Facebook from someone I didn't recognize. The profile picture was blurry, but the message was short. Thanks for the house recommendation. The basement is perfect for my work. The message was sent from Portland. I should have listened to my gut, because what I found in my basement 3 months ago, I still can't sleep properly. And the worst part? I'm starting to think it found me too. My name's David, and I work IT for a mid-sized company here in Portland, Oregon. Nothing fancy, just your typical cube farm existence. I bought this little craftsman house in southeast Portland about 2 years ago. You know, the type built in the 1920s, creaky floors, character they call it. It was my first real adult purchase, and I was proud as hell of it. The house came with all the usual old house quirks. Pipes that knocked when the heat came on, drafts that made the curtains dance. And yeah, smells. But houses built in the 20s, they've got history, right? Previous owners cooking different foods, old wood, that musty basement smell that never quite goes away. Nothing I couldn't handle with some air fresheners and keeping the windows cracked. Everything was fine for the first year and a half. I had my routine down. Work, grab some takeout, Netflix, bed, rinse and repeat. I barely used the basement except to store some boxes and do laundry once a week. It was just this damp, concrete space with exposed beams and a single hanging bulb. Your standard creepy basement. but nothing that kept me up at night. Then last summer, my neighbor Mrs. Chin knocked on my door. She's this sweet older lady who brings me homemade cookies sometimes, real salt-of-the-earth type. But when she showed up that Tuesday evening, she looked uncomfortable. "David, honey," she said, wringing her hands, "I hate to bother you, but there's been this smell coming from your side of the fence. It's been getting stronger and..." She paused, like she didn't want to hurt my feelings. "Well, it's starting to drift into our yard when we open windows." I was mortified. I mean, nobody wants to be the neighbor with the stinky house. I assured her I'd look into it right away. After she left, I did a walk around on my property. Sure enough, near the back corner where my basement wall met the foundation, there was this odor. It wasn't like garbage or sewage. I've smelled both plenty of times living in the city. This was different, organic. Yeah, but with this underlying sweetness that made your stomach turn. Like when you forget meat in the back of your fridge for too long, except more complex, layered, if that makes sense. I figured it had to be a dead raccoon or possum that crawled under the house and couldn't get out. Portland's got tons of urban wildlife, and with all the construction in my neighborhood, animals were always getting displaced. Made perfect sense. So I called around and found this pest control guy, Mike, who specialized in dead animal removal. He showed up the next morning, this gruff, no-nonsense type who'd clearly seen it all. The smell had gotten stronger overnight, and I could tell he noticed it the second he stepped out of his truck. "Oh, yeah," he said, pulling on rubber gloves. "You've definitely got something expired under there. Probably been dead a week or two, judging by the smell." He crawled under the house with a flashlight and spent about an hour poking around. When he came back out, he was frowning. "Here's the weird thing," Mike said, brushing dust off his coveralls. "I can smell it strong as anything down there, but I can't find a source. No body, no bones, no fur. Nothing. And the smell, it's not coming from any specific spot. It's just everywhere." He suggested maybe something died inside the walls, which would explain why he couldn't locate it. Said it happened sometimes in old houses. He could cut into the drywall and check, but it'd be expensive and messy. Why don't I give it another week? See if the smell fades naturally. But it didn't fade. If anything, it got stronger. By the end of that week, I could smell it inside the house. Just faintly at first, like when you're cooking something and the smell clings to your clothes. But then it started seeping up through the basement, especially at night. I tried everything: fans, air purifiers, those industrial-strength odor eliminators you can buy at Home Depot. Nothing touched it. The smell just absorbed everything I threw at it and kept going. Mrs. Chin knocked again, this time with her husband. They were polite but firm. The smell was getting worse, and they were worried it might be a health hazard. I promised them I'd get it sorted ASAP. That's when I called in the big guns, a company that specializes in biohazard cleanup and odor removal. These guys handle crime scenes and hoarder houses, so I figured they'd seen worse. The team leader, this woman named Sarah, showed up with 2 other technicians and more equipment than I knew existed. They had these handheld air quality monitors, UV lights, some kind of spectrometer thing, real CSI level gear. They spent 3 hours going over every inch of my basement and the crawl space under the house. I watched them work, feeling optimistic for the first time in weeks. These people were professionals. They'd figure it out. But when Sarah came upstairs, she had this puzzled look on her face. "Mr. Peterson," she said, "I've been doing this for 12 years, and I've honestly never encountered anything like this. The smell is definitely organic decomposition. Our instrument confirmed that. But there's no source, no body, no biological matter, nothing that should be producing this odor." One of her technicians, this young guy who'd been pretty chatty when they arrived, was packing up his equipment without making eye contact. He looked pale, and when I tried to ask him about it, he just mumbled something about needing to get to their next job. Sarah noticed my confusion. "Look, we ran every test we have. Air quality, Soil samples from under the foundation, moisture levels, everything. By all accounts, your basement should smell like, well, like a normal basement. But it doesn't. She paused, like she was deciding whether to tell me something. I'm gonna be honest with you. My guy Jake down there, he's been doing this almost as long as I have. And he said something I've never heard him say before. He said the smell moved, like it was following him around the basement. I laughed, because what else do you do? Come on, Sarah. Smells don't follow people. No, she said quietly. They don't. They left without charging me. Said they couldn't fix a problem they couldn't identify. But Sarah gave me her card and told me to call if anything changed. By this point, I was getting desperate. The smell was getting into my clothes, my furniture, everything. I was washing my work shirts twice before wearing them, and I'd catch co-workers making faces when I walked by. I was starting to look like the weird guy at the office. I figured maybe it was a sewer line. Old houses, old pipes. Something could have backed up or cracked underground. So I called the most expensive plumber in Portland, thinking if anyone could solve this, it'd be them. The plumber, Roberto, was this older Mexican guy who'd been working on Portland houses since the 70s. He'd seen every weird plumbing problem you could imagine. When I explained the situation, he nodded knowingly. Ah, see the ghost smell. I've seen this before in the old houses. Usually, it's the sewer gases finding crack, or maybe the old septic connection wasn't properly sealed. He spent the whole morning snaking my drains, running cameras through the sewer line, checking every connection in the basement. I was hopeful again. This guy clearly knew what he was doing. But around lunchtime, Roberto came upstairs looking shaken. And I mean shaken. This guy, who probably dealt with the grossest plumbing nightmares Portland had to offer, was visibly upset. "Senor," he said, his English suddenly much more accented than it had been, "I cannot help you. There is nothing wrong with your plumbing. Nothing at all." He packed up his tools quickly, refusing to take payment. As he was leaving, he turned back to me. "My advice? Move. Find somewhere else to live." "But Roberto, it's just a smell. There has to be a logical..." "No!" He cut me off. "Not just a smell. I've been doing this 40 years, and smells, they don't whisper." He left me standing in my driveway, watching his truck disappear around the corner. That night, I couldn't sleep. Roberto's words kept echoing in my head. Smells don't whisper. What the hell did that mean? Around 2 a.m., I found myself standing at the top of the basement stairs. The smell was stronger than ever, like it was calling to me. I know how that sounds, but that's the only way I can describe it. It had this presence now, like it was alive. I grabbed a flashlight and went downstairs. The concrete floor was old and cracked in places, with these dark stains that could have been anything: oil, water damage. Who knows? But there was this one section, right in the center of the basement, where the concrete looked different. Newer, maybe like someone had patched it years ago. I'd never noticed it before, but now, standing directly over it, the smell was overwhelming. It was coming from below. I was sure of it. The next morning, I went to Home Depot and rented a jackhammer. If there was something buried under that concrete, I was going to find it. The neighbors could complain about the noise. I'd deal with the smell first. It took me most of the day to break through. The concrete was thick, maybe 6 inches, and underneath was just packed dirt. But as I dug deeper, the smell got stronger and stronger, until I had to take breaks just to step outside and breathe clean air. About 3 feet down, my shovel hit something hard. Not rock hard, more like metal. I cleared away the dirt with my hands, and there it was, a round metal cover, like a manhole cover, but smaller. Old cast iron with this intricate pattern around the edges that was almost worn smooth. My heart was pounding as I pried it open with a crowbar. The smell that came up nearly knocked me over. It was like being hit with a physical force. But underneath, there was nothing, just an empty circular well, maybe 8 feet deep, lined with old brick, completely dry. I dropped my flashlight down into it, and the beam illuminated smooth brick walls and a dirt floor. No body, no dead animal, no source for the smell at all. But as I knelt there, looking down into this empty hole, I heard something that made my blood freeze. Whispering. It was faint at first, like voices carrying from very far away. Multiple voices, overlapping, speaking in what sounded like different languages. I couldn't make out words, but the tone, God, the tone, it was pleading, desperate, like people begging for something. I jerked back from the opening, my heart hammering. The smell was so strong now it was making me dizzy, and those voices, they were getting clearer, not clearer in language. I still couldn't understand what they were saying, but clearer in emotion. They were afraid, terrified. I grabbed the metal cover and slammed it back down over the opening. The moment it sealed, the whispering stopped. Just like that. Complete silence. But here's the thing that really scared me. As soon as I covered the well, the smell started to fade. Not disappear, just fade, like someone had turned down the volume on it. I stood there in my basement for maybe 10 minutes, just listening. Nothing. The relief was so intense, I almost cried. Finally, I'd found the source and stopped it. I mixed up some concrete and sealed the cover permanently. Spent the next 2 days filling in the hole, smoothing over the floor. By the time I was done, you'd never know there had been anything there. For one blissful week, my house smelled normal again. Mrs. Chin even commented on how nice it was to open her windows again. I thought I'd solved it. I thought it was over. I was so wrong. The smell came back on a Tuesday. Not gradually, all at once, like someone had opened a valve. I woke up around 3 a.m. choking on that same organic, sweet, sick stench. But it was different now. Stronger. More focused, if that makes sense. And the whispers were back too. But they weren't coming from the basement anymore. They were coming from everywhere. The walls, the ceiling, the floor above me. Soft, constant murmuring that I could hear even when I plugged my ears. I ran downstairs to check the basement. The concrete I'd poured was cracked. Not just hairline cracks. Deep fissures that went all the way through to the well below. And from those cracks, that smell was pouring out like smoke from a fire. But the whispers, they weren't coming from the well anymore. They were coming from behind me, all around me, like the basement was full of invisible people, all trying to tell me something I couldn't understand. I ran upstairs and didn't go back down for 3 days. That was 3 months ago. The smell never goes away now. It's in my clothes, my car, my office. People avoid me, and I don't blame them. I've stopped trying to explain it to anyone, because who would believe it? But the worst part? The whispers are getting clearer. Sometimes, late at night, I can almost make out words. Names, maybe, or places. And they're not just in the basement anymore. They follow me everywhere. Last week, I tried to seal the cracks with more concrete. The moment I finished, I could hear screaming from below. Not whispers, actual screaming. Like I'd trapped something down there that didn't want to be trapped. I broke through the concrete again with a sledgehammer. The screaming stopped, but the whispers came back stronger than ever. I've done some research on my house. Turns out it was built on the site of an old boarding house that burned down in 1918. 23 people died in that fire. They were never properly buried, just covered over when they rebuilt. I think it was never empty. I think I've been hearing them this whole time, and sealing it up just makes them angry. The thing is, I'm starting to understand some of what they're saying now, and they're not begging to be let out. They're warning me about something that's coming up from below, something that's been waiting a lot longer than they have. I can smell it getting closer.